Stephanie Will. I am the Mental Health Services Program Manager here at the college. And we are bringing you our Voices of Recovery event live from Science Center 152. Unfortunately, because of the weather, we had to cancel the outdoor event, but we do have our wonderful speakers here with us, and we're going to be live streaming the whole event. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them. I will do my very best to figure out Instagram Live to make sure that we get questions answered, or if you're in the area, want to come down, we welcome anybody who wants to come in and sit and ask questions in person as well. So without further ado, I will tell you first a little bit about, it is Recovery Month in September, and we're really trying to promote hearing stories about the hope of recovery. Recovering from substances can be really difficult, really challenging, and can be kind of fraught, so sometimes people need to hear these hopeful stories. So that's why we've brought in 3 individuals who are in recovery themselves, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about their stories. Plus we'll have some information on substance abuse treatment in general and what that might look like, and places that you can go if you or somebody you love needs some help. So the first speaker that we have with us today is Ben L. Ben is an addict and alcoholic in recovery from opiate stimulants and alcohol since June 13th, 2016. He now works a full-time service industry job and runs occasional therapy groups through the same clinic that helped him in early sobriety as a patient advocate. He is also enrolled in online classes to work toward a psychology degree and pursue his dream of becoming a drug counselor to help other alcoholics and addicts outside of the confines of Anonymous Sobriety Fellowship. He is also a passionate musician and lyricist, which has helped him express himself on his journey. So if everybody will welcome Ben.
Woo! Yeah!
Thanks for having me. My name is Ben and I'm an addict and alcoholic, and it feels good to say that outside of the meeting. I personally don't deal too well with the anonymity principle because I like to be open and honest about the fact that before I was in recovery, my life consisted of one primal emotion that motivated all of my actions, and that was fear. It was fear of knowing myself, it was fear of other people knowing me, and it was fear that people would see the depths of the depraved actions I would take in my addiction to get to that level where I could dissociate myself from those fears. The thing that I didn't notice when I was going to rehab groups in my early attempts at recovery before it really stuck though, was that I thought that recovery would be a cure-all for those fears, and I would just magically, like, you know, those people with 20 years in sobriety I would see in AA meetings who claim or say, I pray to God that it's true, that they have magically been lifted of the curse of addiction. See, that was never the case for me, but I'm here to tell you today that it's awesome that I have the same fears that I used to have in active addiction, just translated into a new sense and a new context in recovery. See, I used to run from fear, and I used to use substances and chemicals, and not just that, but people, places, and things to mediate my fear and kind of offset it. But it's that very fear, and it's that very fear of like self-acceptance and acceptance of other people that motivates me in recovery today. That same like tingly feeling I'm getting now, saying this, exposing myself here, being vulnerable on camera, I used to run from that feeling. I used to tamp it down with drugs and drinking because I didn't want to feel anything. But it's that feeling that I got when I was dope sick in rehab. It's that feeling I got when I went to my first meeting and didn't want to look people in the eye, which is the same feeling motivating me now to get out of bed in the morning and chase a different kind of high, and that high is recovery. Recovery is a drug, make no doubt about it. You have natural neurotransmitters in your brain, or at least I do, that kind of motivate you. Dopamine, serotonin, GABA, these are all things that, I thought I could manage myself with different chemicals. And for a while I thought I was doing a pretty damn good job about it. I would wake up in the morning, and just like I schedule my day now around my job, around meetings, I would schedule it around use of different substances. But today I have a better way of doing things, and a better way of managing my chemicals, managing my stress, and managing that anxious fear that I didn't know could be the most powerful motivating factor in my life today. I'll give you an example. I wake up and I go to a meeting or I go to my job, and I see a person and I don't want to make eye contact with them. The reason is not that I'm afraid of that person, it's I'm afraid of what that person is going to see in me. What I'm really afraid of is that the person I feel on the inside of the shell I put out towards the world is not going to be accepted. Now, one of the principles of recovery is acceptance. It's like, how am I going to accept what I can't change? And for me, that means, how am I not going to just accept other people, but how am I going to accept myself in that situation? How am I going to accept that I feel nervous? how am I going to accept that maybe this nervous feeling is something that I can translate into a positive thing? And that's what I do today. So I'm not going to get too into fellowship. I'm not going to break anonymity in more ways than one today with this Instagram stream. But I am going to talk about a couple different ways in which the principles from that anonymous fellowship have affected my life today. For me, AA is all about inventory and cleaning house, and that's as far as I'm going to go with it. I don't go to a program in order to make myself a person who gets certain things like material goals or actions or anything like that. It's more of a place where I can understand myself in a context of different spiritual principles. And for me, it just means that I have to go out and get it. Today I'm alive and I'm not using substances to deaden my feelings and my emotions, which is a gift of recovery. I can be myself, and more than that, I can use the day and I can use the fact that I'm alive today and not choosing to numb myself down with chemicals to try and help other people. I used to think that these emotions were my enemy. I would go to any lengths not to feel good, not to feel bad, not to be anything but this kind of dead equilibrium. And in the body, when they talk about osmosis, homeostasis, this kind of managing up and down, equilibrium is death. I used to chase that kind of numb stillness where I didn't have to listen to the incessant chattering in my own head saying I wasn't good enough. But today, when I get to a different point in my life, through this recovery, I can look at things and I can love the challenge of looking people in the eye. I can love the challenge of not thinking I'm perfect. And in the same way I used to run away from that, I can run toward it and say, maybe I'm not perfect, but maybe that's the motivation I need to chase my goals today. Because if life were perfect and recovery was a perfect romance fantasy novel with Fabio on the cover, it wouldn't be a perfect world. The irony is that perfection in itself isn't perfect. Recovery isn't perfect because it gives me something to chase when I get up in the morning. See, it's a gift that I had addiction. It's a gift that I had that kind of self-hatred and self-flagellating nature that inspired me to use drugs and run away from myself in the first place, because I have the ability to translate that into a new life today. And I'll close with this. That scared little kid who used to run to the bottle and the needle and the crack pipe, that scared little kid who feels scared now to just look at this camera and be honest about who I am and say that I'm still nervous and say that I'm still afraid of myself and everyone around me, that same nervous energy is what inspires me to run toward it. Because today, I'm free from addiction for the day. If I admit that I'm an addict and I need some help, I'm free from the past expectations that I have to be perfect all the time. And for once in my life, the freedom of knowing that I am bound by this disease of addiction is bigger than the addiction of itself. And like we say in that anonymous fellowship, thanks for letting me share.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben, for sharing with us. We really appreciate you really coming out of that shell and sharing that nervousness and that experience with us. So that's super invaluable. So thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Patty S. Patty is a retired physician's assistant, a RISE interventionist intern, and recovery coach. She struggled with substance use disorder for several years and was eventually referred to Kolmac Outpatient Recovery Center in 2014 for treatment. At the suggestion of the clinicians at Kolmac, she entered a 12-step program and has continued her sobriety since September 1st, 2014. So welcome, Patty.
Hi, I'm Patty, and I am also an individual that suffers with substance use disorder. And like Ben said before, one of the stumbling blocks that led me to getting help was my own self, because I thought I could do it on my own. I thought that I had the willpower, the strength, the knowledge, everything to get help for myself, but I didn't. It took me many years to get in there, and I think the many years of the life transitions that I went through led me to just numb out because I didn't know how to process those life transitions. Since I went in and went through the program at Kolmac, their continuing care, and I got into a community support group, my life has done 180 degrees. And the one thing that I really speak about is education, because I'm in an education environment, and I had to go through the education about substance use disorder, its different modalities of treatment, as well as follow-up care in maintaining a sober lifestyle. even though I had to give up a career that I loved tremendously, I have been able to change things around and do some things within the recovery community that bring me a lot more satisfaction and joy than what I did in my former career. I will tell you that at a young age, it was suggested to me in my 20s that I may have had a problem with alcohol, and I didn't listen to it. I was able to continue that for several years, but I was able to stop on my own for 13 years. However, all the stuff that I felt I needed to numb out from that happened to me as a youngster was still there. So all the behavior, all the thoughts, all the things that go along with being what we call a dry drunk was still present. And it wasn't until I got into recovery and started working in a 12-step program. And I will say that even though I am in a 12-step fellowship, there are other things that people can choose that are non-12-step. There's a lot of other programs in our community, especially here in the DC area, that we can go to get the support and the help that we need. And I think it's imperative that people educate themselves, people accept that there is an issue, and people get the treatment because there's a lot of different treatment modalities available as well. And declining or minimizing the problem of substance use disorder is really an injustice because I think it's my personal feeling that everybody's affected by it. Either we know somebody, or we've seen somebody, or we have a colleague, or we have a friend or a family member that suffers from this disease. There is help available, the stigma needs to go, and treatment needs to happen for everybody. So thank you for letting me say my story.
But thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. So our last speaker that we're going to be bringing up is Grace Caulfield, who is the Director of Clinical Outreach at the Kolmac Outpatient Recovery Center. Grace has worked in the field of addiction for over 23 years. She brings to Kolmac a wealth of knowledge and experience with both adolescent and adult populations, as well as a strong background in family therapy. She has worked in a variety of clinical settings, to include both inpatient, outpatient, psychiatric hospitals, and halfway house settings. She joined the Kolmac team in 2013. She holds a master's degree in counseling psychology and is a licensed professional counselor in Maryland, as well and as holds her CACAD through the Board of Professional Counselors of Maryland. She received Level 1 Trauma Certification through the Institute of Advanced Psychotherapy and Training, which she incorporates in her clinical approach and practice. In November of last year, she transitioned to the role of clinical outreach with the organization. In this role, she is able to develop and manage local referral relationships with inpatient detox facilities, hospitals, and physicians in the community. In addition, she is able to assist the CEO on maintaining and leveraging local professional relationships of potential referrals and increased prevention efforts within the college and university settings through outreach and include families seeking help for their loved ones. So, she's very professional and very wonderful. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to be here. It's so important to collaborate with this event and, Voices for Recovery. Obviously I was very, very young when I started in the field. I'm just kidding. But, really to collaborate, especially, with colleges and universities. Montgomery College is really spearheading some of these events, and it's so important and a passion of ours at Kolmac to really do some prevention, early intervention, but earlier that we can sort of address substance use disorders, addiction, mental health, and recovery, the better outcomes. And so I'm thrilled and excited and so happy and be with outstanding stories and remember each one of these, people on their first day. And so it's really a gift and an honor to see, recovery in action. And so one of the things, that we want to sort of leave as takeaways for anybody is really that there really is help, and to continue to have the voice in recovery, to try to break down the barrier of shame, and to try to lean on resources, whether it's through the counseling center here at Montgomery College, through the local resources, which is one of our, our offices, which we have 6 in the DC area, and we're expanding. But figuring out sort of who can you trust, who can you go to try to get help. One of the other things that Patty talked about, if it's not formal treatment, but there's local meetings, or through a faith-based, through the church community, or through lots of different avenues, but just try to figure out how we can continue to be a voice, because if people in recovery came together and really started to really unite, that really we could try to combat this crisis that we're in as a country, and to really we're seeing the more and more prevalence of trying to address things and stay on top of things, as a field, be proactive. We've done some different things now in the field lately to try to address the stigma, and part of that is to take courage and to try to have a face and be out here and talk about it. One of the family secrets sort of in substance use is really to not talk about things because of shame, because of cultural differences, that families are raised and keep secrets. But that's why I think this is such a great event, even with this weather that keeps traveling, following us. But whatever we can do to continue to have conversations, whether it's with a teacher or a provider or a physician or somebody that you can trust in, to try to have a dialogue, I think starts to break away a little bit at that wall of shame. Hopefully that will have someone to have a conversation and a connection. Recovery is about connection, and so if we can come together as a community and to feel like you can relate to someone in a way that helps you feel a little bit stronger and better, that hopefully you can get on your way to the right path, which we have seen today. And I mean, it's very emotional for me. Luckily I've been in the field long enough that I can turn that piece off, but I mean, it's a gift. It really is an honor and a gift to work in the field, to kind of see the journey from the very first day and then now to several years later in these particular stories that we saw today. So
can you talk a little bit about like levels of treatment
Sure.
that individuals might go through?
Sure. So there's various levels of care that people need, and so what's really great about being specifically in Montgomery County, but in the DMV area, which is not where you get your driver's license, but in the DC metro area, is there's just a wealth of opportunity and resources. So some people, may need something depending on how much use they are engaging in, may need detox level of care. We need to be very careful about substances because some could be life-threatening. So, alcohol, for instance, withdrawal from alcohol, depending on how much you use, could be life-threatening. Benzodiazepines, medication could be life-threatening. You really need to be, utilizing physician and medical care. And so, for instance, you would need potentially either hospitalization or an outpatient ambulatory detox, which Kolmac, as one of those options, could do that as an outpatient detox, but there's other providers in the area that could do that. Intensive outpatient, which is a really nice option for people to do treatment and then stay in school at the same time, or go to treatment and work at the same time. All of those things. The goal for recovery is to really be able to maintain your life and do what you need to take care of your families or your children or work and be in your relationship, all concurrently while you're really trying to reestablish your life. So intensive outpatient or outpatient. sometimes though, depending on what's going on and the consequences, either, physically, spiritually, emotionally, depending on acuity and what's happening, is you might need a higher level of care, based on safety, psychiatrically, medically, again, so forth. You might need an inpatient level of care. A clinician or physician or group team would assess that, and you might need inpatient. There's lots of great resources for that, and so it would be a short stay, hopefully, and I only roll my eyes on the fact that sometimes what a patient or a client feels is a decent time or a length of stay versus what a practitioner or a clinician feels is a length of stay can sometimes vary. It's hard sometimes to surrender your will and decide like, okay, I'm ready and I'll follow directions is kind of a challenge in the field of behavioral health. But an inpatient level stay, the 30-day programs these days are kind of more of a rarity, but let's say a short length of stay inpatient where you would go, stay there, focus on yourself, work on recovery, mental health, co-occurring, what have you, and then come back into the community. Again, depending. What's really exciting about sort of the field as a whole is we're really looking at now trauma-informed treatment. We're really looking at underlying misdiagnosed diagnoses. I guess that's redundant. But we're really trying to find out like what are we missing and what can we help get some collaborative or other conjunctive, adjunctive therapies, addressed and help patients.
Can you actually talk a little bit about the intersection of substance abuse and mental health, since they often co-occur together?
Sure. So as far as therapeutic interventions?
Yeah, or just some things that you've seen.
So like for instance, one of the approaches that Kolmac uses, which is very passionate, I'll say passion in the community. Again, just one example is we are so lucky to be local because we really use evidence-based treatment. So we rely on NIDA, we rely on NIH, SAMHSA, and so forth. Again, just one of the options. There's lots of opportunities, but we believe in medication-assisted recovery for our opiate population. What that means is for patients that need medication to help them either withdraw from opiates or decide on a treatment plan that they want to have a maintenance medication to help them, protect them so they don't have a risk of overdosing on an opiate. Heroin included in that. Fentanyl included in that, with a crisis right now for our young adults in particular, not that there's older adults not engaging in that as well, is we would use Suboxone or Subutex or Vivitrol. Vivitrol is not, but is medication as well. That might be an option. So pharmacology would be an intervention that we might use as that. For co-occurring, we're looking at a lot of people that have bipolar, anxiety, depression, that they've been self-medicating. It's not necessarily unrelated to some of the fear that Ben talked about, but it may be something that's going on where somebody is labeling it something, and then we're really realizing, oh, well, wait, there's trauma there. Again, not connecting it necessarily to his particular story, but we're sort of realizing something happened in this particular case, another person's case where it's like they really have anxiety because this happened and this happened. And once we medicate it or connect them to cognitive behavioral therapy with an individual practitioner in the field, couple that with maybe sober support and maybe a patient advocate, and so we're putting like a whole support system, and really, giving this person every opportunity and rallying around them. It's amazing how successful they can be in recovery rather than here they are all by themselves, feeling shame, all alone, isolating, and then back in the spiral and hiding rather than like, wow, we've got all these resources, has been a different outcome.
And that sounds like it ties into the really important family aspect of recovery. So can you talk a little bit about how families get involved in the recovery process?
So I appreciate that question. So family is a huge, huge piece. Oftentimes, family will sort of think like, go fix Tyrone. Thank you, and then not realize that it's a whole family system. that certainly, and again, I think we heard a little bit through the stories today, like family is really impacted, obviously through the trials and tribulations in active use, but also in recovery. Like family has really hopes that instantly someone will get well if they get into recovery. But they have their own journey and their own process. So resources for family, interventions for family, counseling for family, education for family. Family have no clue. A lot of times family have no idea that use is even going on. Really, when you think about sort of an educational setting, we talk often about every patient that I see, I feel like already has their doctorate, MD, JD, LMNOP, sort of in active use, pharmacology, salesman. I mean, like they are the best and keep it so hidden that family had no idea that they were using. And so all of a sudden, it's this whole shift for family to say, let's see, how can you support, not enable, not be provoking. So giving them psychoeducation. We have free family groups at our centers, but there's also like lots of there's therapists out there that do family sessions. There's Nar-Anon and Al-Anon, and the fellowships that were also mentioned today have family components. I think family is really important, but family, with that being said, family can oftentimes not be open to that. Patty has a problem. There's no problem over here. This person has a problem. No problem. So that takes, some clinical skills, and really, or even in the counseling of Montgomery College, hey, to work together, employee assistants, really professionals to all work together to see if we can get a spouse or, somebody involved, because I think the healthier the family is, especially if someone goes to inpatient and then comes home, if there's use at home or drinking or even social drinking, it's very difficult for someone to recover.
Thank you. Actually, could we bring Ben and Patty back up and have a little Q&A session if anybody has any questions?
I love some Q's and A's.
Awesome. So make sure everyone's in the frame.
Thanks.
So, I guess my question for everybody would be, was there a point in your recovery where you kind of felt like, is this even worth it? Should I just give up and go back to what I was doing before? This is too hard.
About every day. I mean, every day I kind of went through weighing the odds about whether I should, intentionally try to OD or keep going, or that was part of the process. One of the corny maxims I used to hate when I would go into meetings in active addiction was, oh God, group of drunks, good orderly direction. But my favorite one that rings true today is gift of desperation. I had to have the gift of that desperation and that feeling of hopelessness in order to be open to the hope that awaited me on the other side of it. And that takes a lot of different forms. Some people, they talk about, like high bottom addicts and alcoholics. I was scraping the bottom of the low, but everyone gets to it in a different way. But I actually think, relevant to what I said earlier, that kind of desperation and that kind of hopelessness can be flipped into positivity, because from that point, it can only go up.
I definitely agree with Ben. There are times when the thought of going back to how I was and what I was doing looks somewhat appealing. However, when I go to my job as a patient advocate, when I work with other people that are in active addiction, when I further educate myself about this and the family component of this disease, because it affects several members of my family actively at this point, I am able to reflect and realize that I don't want to go back there. I've totally turned my life around and have been able to regain much more than what I ever thought was possible. And it's just not worth it. The thoughts do come there, but there's tools that we learn through education, support, attending meetings, talking to people, that we call it a toolbox, to make us, or to give us the ability to reach out and ask for help. It's very hard to do, but once you do it, you do it. And you just keep putting one foot in front of the other. So,
And kind of along the same lines, was there a moment where you felt like you turned the corner, like, okay, I can do this. This is something that's within reach for me?
Yeah, I think it was like my 7th, 8th, or 9th treatment I've been to in my life. Kind of both IOP and inpatient, just happened to be an inpatient up in Pennsylvania. And I had just detoxed off with Suboxone, and I was really starting to feel it. And that kind of fear I talked about earlier came in. And I'm very good at manipulating my family, even better at it when I'm an active addict. I'm a master con man, especially when instant gratification of chemicals is involved. And well, there's an instant gratification thing right there on my phone. Just trying to gratify itself by me answering it, but I'm not going to do that. Basically, I had the option of conning my family into letting me out. And I had my family convinced that I was definitely going to stay sober and go to another treatment center if they would just let me out. And it was kind of like the last hurrah of my addictive, compulsive behavior. But I was sitting in this back room with my bags packed and 300 wired from my family that I was going to use and go to Philadelphia and probably OD and die with. And I just realized it was going to be harder for me to keep fighting the battle of constantly trying to numb myself down and kill myself than it would be to just have that acceptance and start over in a new way. And I guess that relief that I felt in that moment, knowing that it was only going to be hard if I continued wanting to use and control. Ironically, I gained the most control I've ever had in my life by sacrificing control of that situation. So that was the moment for me where acceptance came into play.
the moment for me that came into play, knowing that I could potentially do this, was when I was able to get off of the opioids that I was prescribed for 10 years. Diverting that with alcohol, the way that I felt horrible every morning when I woke up. And after about 2-3 weeks of not having a substance in my body, and my brain started to function again, I realized that this is possible. I had no idea that I was going to be able to maintain sobriety for the 4 years. I thought I would just go in and, dry up for a little bit, and then I could do some controlled drinking. I wanted off the opioids, and both of them worked. I got off of both, and I'm still able to function, because I had chronic pain. That's why I was treated with the opioids. I still have pain, but I don't need to take the opioids because I've done other alternative things to help with that chronic pain and to get off of the opioids. And just, going in there and having a little bit of a clear mind, and the education I received and the support that I received, that's what gave me the aha moment.
Does anyone have any other questions? I have another one, so I just wanted to make sure that anyone got a chance to jump in if they wanted to. But is there anything, I know I mentioned in your intro, Ben, that you're a musician, and that's something that you've used in your journey, but what are some other things that you all have done that keep you sober, that are the things that you do in your everyday? I know you're both patient advocates, things like that. What other types of things?
For me, I started an exercise program.
Okay.
Because I wasn't working, and I was used to being on the go all the time, and when I hit the wall to ask for help, I had to do something else to occupy my time. So I started swimming, I started working out, I started eating better, I started going to meetings. I was going to 8 or 9 meetings a week because I had to do something every day. I had to have a routine. If I drank every day and was taking the opioids every day, I needed to do something every day to keep my recovery in check. So I had to do a total 180 so that I could stay sober and not get my life back, because I didn't want the old life. It's a new life. I don't want to go back to the old me, because the old me was not the way I needed to be. So I started a whole new routine of different things. And acupuncture. I did acupuncture for my pain. The exercise helped. Everything, so that's what worked for me.
I love that. For me, it's forward motion. It manifests in different ways. Music, creativity. Sometimes it's being there for my family, getting a job, becoming self-sufficient. I feel like individuation is a really big part of this for a lot of young kids in the opioid epidemic. There's a lot of kids who, through their own mistakes, through addiction or life circumstances, are unable to, get off their couch, get a job, and, make something out of their life. And I was certainly unable to do that, even though I was afforded a lot of privileges in my life. What it means to me to be sober is that I have the ability to pursue not just one thing. As an active addiction protagonist journey was entirely next bag, next fix, don't care about anything else. The cool thing about recovery is that if one aspect of my life isn't going well, my job's not going well, I can work on my education, I can work on exercise, I can work on developing a program, working with a sponsor, working with a sponsee. I can do things that I would have never thought about doing. I can go to a banjo concert if I want. I can do anything, and that's cool. I can keep things moving forward because, as she said, don't want to go back to the old life. And more than that, I have the ability now to choose whether I want to go back to that old life or not. I have the ability to choose what I want to do, which is something I never had the ability to do in active addiction.
What advice would you give to a young person who is starting down that road and to prohibit them from having to go so far to their recovery? But if they are starting down that road and need to make a turn at this point, what advice would you give? And I mean young person like a young college student, even high schoolers, what advice, if any?
Well, I waited many, many years before I got help. I knew it in my 20s, but I didn't do it because that wasn't the thing to do. My advice would be to look at it. It's a disease. There's a lot of treatment that's available. There is help that's available. There's advocates that can help you through this. There's a lot of resources. Just ask for help. Get educated about the disease. Get educated to your family and recognize it. It's not anything to be ashamed of.
For me, it actually boils down to a quote I heard in a movie that I used to watch when I was using. It's Ewan McGregor indie film, Trainspotting, where he says, choose life at the beginning. And the story is about a heroin addict who doesn't choose life, but in the end he ends up choosing it. And it's a good analogy because, when I was an addict, I used to think, I don't want the picket fence, I don't want the car. I didn't want to have this kind of delusion where I was going to sell out if I chose sobriety. And I did sell out my ability to change consciousness chemically. And I used to tie in this whole kind of countercultural rebellion and music and the whole aesthetic of my time with that drug use. And it was hard to separate that. But the best advice I can give to someone who's young, old, young specifically, I'm going to say, it's a lot more fun getting high from taking back control of your life and seeking out the natural rewards that the world and that sobriety has to offer than sitting on your couch shooting dope, smoking crack, wishing you could be alive another day and just be free. Because I'm free now. And I did experience a brief, euphoric, ephemeral, fleeting chemical freedom at one point, but about a year or two in to when the drugs got real and the addiction got real, it was just to survive. And I was a prisoner in a cage of my own making that I thought was gilded when I was getting in it, and ended up rusting and breaking down around me. And so what I would say is choose life, because life is a better high than dope or alcohol or anything else.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming out and, oh good, I get to go on camera again. Thank you guys so much for coming out and being part of our Voices of Recovery event today. So thank you Kolmac, thank you Ben, thank you Patty, thank you Grace so much. I don't know if I can say thank you many more times, but I know how difficult this can be to come out, talk about some of these things. So we appreciate you helping our students and hopefully many more people in the community on their journeys that hopefully they're going to be starting today, right?
Right.
So
Stephanie, can you give us some information if we have students that need to talk to someone and want to seek help on campus resources?
and if you guys want to take a seat, I actually have some PowerPoint slides
Thank you.
to that effect. I have some information about local AA, NA groups, and some treatment programs. in the area. There's pretty much a meeting everywhere all the time, especially AA. I don't know if NA has gotten as prevalent in the last couple of years with all the opioids that have been going in the area. But there's no excuse not to go to a meeting. Let's just put it that way, right?
Right.
And so Montgomery County also does have an outpatient addiction services, including a medication-assisted treatment program, like Grace was talking about, with methadone, Suboxone, things along those lines. We talk about how if somebody is a diabetic and they have to take insulin to control their disease, then we wouldn't think twice about it. So if an opioid addict needs to take methadone to help control their cravings and to control and prevent relapse, why should we tell them not to take those medications if they need to? Montgomery Recovery Services, they also have an MAT program. MedStar Montgomery has an addiction program. And of course, Kolmac, the wonderful, wonderful organization that came out and talked to us today. And a number of others as well. Here on campus, we do have our Student Health and Wellness Center, which is an online resource center. We have these and more information for mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment on our social media, on our website. So please give us a peek. The Shaw Center, if you hear us talking about it, obviously you should know because you're looking at us on our Instagram. So we like to post a lot of stuff, and we have all those resources there. Plus, if you do need to talk to somebody on campus, we do have counseling and advising centers on each of our campuses. You can book an appointment through Starfish. Any other particular best ways to kind of get in touch with them, I guess. You can call. I don't have the phone numbers right here, but their phone numbers are on the website. You can call, make an appointment as well. You can, I guess, also walk in, but I know they're pretty busy, so making an appointment is probably the best way to go. But we do have individuals who are welcome to or happy to talk to you guys if you do need some assistance on campus. So to wrap up, I want to say thank you to everybody for watching, following